Hey guys! So hopefully y'all had a really good weekend. And also hopefully y'all watched the video that I posted last week about Darwin. So we're out of genetics now, and now we're going to be starting evolution. So today I'm going to present some evolution notes. I went ahead and posted up the completed notes on Google Classroom. That way you can follow along with this PowerPoint. A couple of other announcements. So grades are due this week. I will be submitting grades on Wednesday. So if you're missing anything, make sure that you get onto Google Classroom, go ahead and complete it. If you want to make sure that I got it, send me a message on Remind or send me an email. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so, okay, if you look right here, we have a couple of cell phones, so more than a couple. So go ahead and place the phones in order from oldest to the most recent. I know some of our more recent phones aren't on here, but go ahead and just look at them real quick and figure out which ones are the oldest ones and which ones are the most recent ones. All right, so you probably picked B first. If you look at B, okay, that did actually used to be a cell phone. I knew some people who owned those a long, long time ago. And it was really funny because you could unscrew the antenna just to make sure that it actually fit in your car, in your purse, wherever it is that you wanted to put it. Okay, so after B, we have F. Okay, that was a bigger flip phone, still had an antenna. Okay, and the antenna was really bulky. After that, we went down to D, so things got a little bit smaller, but they were still pretty heavy and unfortunately could break pretty easily. Then we had C. Okay, so if you look at C, it's another type of flip phone. The camera's in the front. The camera wasn't very good, if I remember correctly. After that, you got E. Okay, so E was when texting started to become a little bit of a thing. And so you had another bigger, bulkier phone that had a little bit of a keyboard on it. And then we got to A. So A is a primitive iPhone. And as we know, iPhone has evolved since then. So that is our oldest to youngest. So we're going to be talking about evolution. So evolution is a change over time. And so when we talk about evolution, this is a theory that explains how modern organisms have descended from ancient organisms. Okay, so it's a change in a population over time. Okay, so that's a key thing, change in a population, not in an individual. So in 1809, there was a researcher called Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He published his hypothesis of inheritance of acquired traits during an organism's lifetime. So unfortunately, those ideas were flawed. They were wrong. But he was one of the first to try and explain how organisms change over time. Okay, and that's why we still talk about him. So what does this mean? Okay, so according to Lamarck, he was thinking that if you had a really, really short giraffe, and let's say that you had a tree that was just growing taller, the giraffe could try, to stretch his neck up higher and higher and eventually grow out his neck longer until he could reach the tree. Okay, we know that doesn't happen. If you want to be taller, you can't magically think, of yourself being taller and then you'll grow taller. So here comes along Charles Darwin. Okay, so Charles Darwin developed the central idea of evolution. So hopefully you watched that video last week. Okay, so he thought up the idea of natural selection. There were a couple of others before him that, contributed to his ideas, but he was the one that actually sailed on the Beagle in 1831. It was a 5-year voyage, and on that voyage, he collected a lot of evidence that supported his theory of evolution. So Darwin started out coming from England, and he traveled to South America. He's most known for traveling to the Galapagos Islands, but basically he did travel all over the world. So in the Galapagos Islands, which is off of South America, he observed some native finches and some tortoises. And so he collected a lot of information from those individuals. So after a while, Darwin published the results of all of his work into a revolutionary view of the living world called On the Origin of Species in 1859. So he actually waited a little while after his voyage before he published. And that was just because he knew that it was going to cause some controversy, and so he decided to wait until some other scientists gathered more information too. So basically, okay, what is he saying? So the summary of Darwin's theory is that individual organisms differ, and some of this variation is passed from parents to offspring. So some of those variations are heritable. We just finished up genetics, and we talked about how parents are going to pass on their traits to their offspring. So if you think about a trait maybe that runs in your family that not very many people have, maybe an abnormal eye color, maybe an abnormal hair color, hair that is curly when you're first born and then it goes straight, things like that, those are passed from parents to offspring. So organisms produce more offspring than can survive, and not all of them will reproduce. So if you think about insects, if you think about birds, they have more babies than will actually survive. How many times do you see a bird's egg that, didn't hatch, on the ground when you go outside? Or how many insects, especially insect babies, become prey to other species. Also, organisms are going to compete for limited resources. Okay, there's a struggle for existence. Remember, we talked about the carrying capacity in ecology. There's only so much food, there's only so much space to support a population. So Darwin also discovered that each living species has descended with changes from other species over time. We call this descent with modification. So if you think, for example, about some fossilized species, so let's go example for sharks. Sharks are really easy. Okay, so probably all of y'all have heard of the megalodon, okay, that humongous shark that could probably swallow an entire village. But we don't have sharks that big nowadays. The biggest ones we probably have would be like the great white, maybe some tiger sharks, the whale shark, things like that. And so we don't have sharks that are that big. And when you think about it, the megalodon wouldn't survive today because we don't have enough prey items in the ocean to sustain it. There wouldn't be enough food to sustain a species that big. So if we look at modern day sharks, they look a lot like megalodon. They have the same type of teeth, same type of jaws, but they're a lot smaller. So Darwin is best known for his theory of evolution by natural selection. Okay, so I told you guys that one of the species that he studied was these finches. Okay, so finches are little tiny birds. And one of the things that he noticed about the finches is that they have different types of beaks. So they're all finches. That means they all have similar coloration, similar structures, but the beak sizes were a lot different, and that depended on what they were eating. So if you had a big, thick beak, then you were probably eating seeds. If you had a medium-sized beak that was kind of curved, you're probably eating flower buds or fruits. A little pointed beak would be for grubs, another little pointed beak for insects, and then just a plain triangle beak for leaves. So each of these finches had different sizes and different shapes of their beaks, and so that helped them survive according to their food source. So all evolutionary mechanisms produce change in populations, but not in individuals. So what does that mean? So that means, for example, with these finches, okay, so I told you guys the big one right here, okay, the big one ate a lot of seeds. So what happens, for example, if there's a drought and so you're losing fruits, maybe there aren't as many insects, okay, which finch is going to be able to survive? It's going to be the ones that can eat the seeds because seeds will still exist even if there's a drought going on. Same thing down here. If I look at these snails right here, okay, so we have variation. We have some light colored snails and some brown colored snails. And so for whatever reason, okay, maybe there's something in the environment that allows those brown snails to maybe stay hidden. Maybe a predator's not going to come and eat them. And so that means that a predator would be able to see these light colored snails and those will get eaten. So now all of a sudden we're going to start seeing more brown snails. So sometimes we refer to natural selection as survival of the fittest. So individuals with adaptations that are best suited to their environment will survive and reproduce. And when they reproduce, they're able to pass on their traits to their offspring. Okay, that's what survival of the fittest means. It doesn't mean that they're the strongest. It doesn't mean that they're the fastest. It's whatever it is that allows them to survive long enough to reproduce. So for example, okay, so if you have an organism with dark color fur, okay, that can blend into the woods, they may have a better chance of survival than something that has light colored fur. So if I look, for example, okay, at this little scenario, so I have some dark colored mice and some light colored mice, and then I have a predator circling above. So of course, the predator is probably going to see these light colored mice a little bit easier. So that means that the dark ones are going to be able to survive. And so over a period of time, the population is going to gradually turn more to dark-colored mice. So, what do you understand? Okay, so according to Darwin, okay, what type of individuals will survive and reproduce and pass their heritable traits to their offspring? Okay, so individuals with adaptations that are best suited to their environment. Good job. Okay, all right, so that was natural selection. Okay, let's talk about artificial selection. So Darwin observed that plant and animal breeders are going to use variation to improve crops and livestock. So for example, to make faster horses, larger fruits. If you go to the grocery store, can you pick any fruit that you want? And that's because of artificial selection. So we've been able to pick the genes that allow fruit to stay ripe year round. So in artificial selection, nature provides the genetic variation and then we use it to select the traits that we want. So for example, okay, did you know that cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, kale, broccoli, and cauliflower all descended from the same plant? So you can kind of tell, like for example, the way you cook them, they may taste, pretty similar. So they all descended from this plant, Brassica oleracea. I can never say that. And so what ended up happening were these farmers, they took this original plant and they selected for certain parts of the plant. So for example, for cabbage, okay, they selected for terminal buds. Okay, so terminal buds means buds at the very base of the plant. Okay, and that's what made a cabbage. Brussels sprouts, they selected for lateral buds, so buds that were further up on the plant. Kohlrabi, they selected for the stem, whichever one had the biggest stem. Kale selected for the leaves, the ones that had the biggest, fluffiest leaves. Broccoli, did you know broccoli is actually a flower? So they did a selection for the stems and the flowers. And then for cauliflower, they selected for flower clusters, okay? And that's why cauliflower is different than broccoli. It tastes almost the same, but cauliflower is for the cluster of flowers. So all of these vegetables descended from the same plant, but certain parts of the plants were selected for over others. Okay, if we look at dogs, okay, we have a lot of different types of dogs, but they all descended from a certain species of wolf. And so if we look at different types of dogs, we have, the Dachshund, we have poodles, we have Dalmatians, German Shepherds. And so what breeders did was they selected for certain things that they wanted in that dog. So for example, if we look at Dachshunds, Dachshunds were originally bred in order to be hunting dogs, and they were long and skinny, so that way they could actually dive into the burrows and go after prey. Poodles, actually don't know what poodles were bred originally for, but they were bred to be long and lean, and have that accumulation of fur, like on their feet, on their tail, and on their chest. German Shepherds, were bred to be protectors, to be guard dogs. And so, they were trying to find, dogs that were a little bit more intimidating, that had that herd mentality to be able to protect families. So all of our species of dogs were bred for a certain reason. So, okay, here's a little comic strip for you to enjoy. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing, this week is a short week. So you have Friday off. I know Fiesta's not going on, but we still kept the Battle of the Flowers holiday. So I'll go ahead and post up the rest of this lecture at the end of the week, so that way you can complete this assignment. So all of your evolution assignments are going to go on to next 6 weeks. You don't have to worry about it for this 6 weeks. If you have questions about your grade or questions about this content, go ahead and email me or send me a message on Remind. All right, I hope you have a great day. Bye.